Hello. Excuse the kill mails, just a bit of context. As I was beginning to make the video, 3 interceptors came around and attacked at home, so I had to go show them the exit, and the third one ran. So big sad face, but it is what it is. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to my first video ever. My name is Sansha. I'm recognized as the one and only master of mediocrity, and I'm the head fleet commander and PvP director for the StarCats Corporation, as well as the head defense FC of Southern Delve, and a congregate known as the OKFem Initiative. At first, I didn't quite know what I would make the video about, but I figured I would make it a bit about everything, kind of like what I do in the game. So, to start off, I'd like to give a huge shout out to my corporation for having donated enough to my GoFundMe, which has made it possible for me to produce the video you're currently watching. I really do have the greatest corporation in the game, in my opinion, and they're definitely a community like no other. I encourage all interaction with them, even if you're an enemy. I am beyond grateful and ecstatic to get the ball rolling with new and exciting content, and with Nihilist Space around the corner, what better time to start? Now, I won't dive into the wormhole that is the exploration update, mostly because there's a lot of debate about the accuracy of the details being provided, and I don't really want to start the first video I ever make making inaccurate assumptions based on wordplay. But I also won't pretend to sugarcoat the business model of the game, and I don't want to shit on NetEase's concepts or make any invaluable points. All I can say is that although I have my reservations about it, I'm still very much so thrilled about the upcoming patches and changes being made to the game. C-type module upgrades probably being the one I'm most exuberant with. I honestly believe that by taking advantage of the update as soon as immediately after the release, it probably would dramatically increase the overhead and capital of any corporation or alliance who decides to capitalize on that new market. It only makes sense to do that. In conclusion, I am very excited to see what the developers have planned for us in the future past exploration, and I think all of New Eden should too. This will be bringing a lot of new and ambitious content to enjoy, and I know that I will certainly be out there in these anomalous areas taking people down for whatever they've managed to find in them, and I'm hopeful that you will all join me on that journey. As an outline of what this channel will be about, it is based on a game called eveechoes, which is a sandbox-based MMORPG that is very much player-driven in terms of in-game progression and regression. And on this channel, I hope to serve as a reliable source of information regarding the behind-the-scenes mechanics of the game, and give you little tricks and tips that could very well help you survive, escape, or even win your next encounter with an invading enemy pilot in lower nullsec. And now to kick off our first segment ever, I'm going to talk about a little tactic that I utilize quite often, especially in PvP, mostly even when I'm traveling around New Eden. It's very helpful. It's called speed warp jumping. What is that, you ask? It is exactly what it suggests that it is. It is a quicker way to get places. It allows you to outrun enemies if you're being chased. Comparatively, you can use the trick to get ahead of a target you're chasing through a pipe, and then you can lock them down on the other side of a gate, for example. It's generally used to just get places faster, but I would be very careful doing this in nullsec, especially if you're in a big ship, because you will get locked down on a gate on the opposite side without having realized it, unless you have a scout with you. So as you see, I'm going to approach the gate here. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to pause the autopilot. And as soon as that symbol disappears on the center of the screen, I'm going to play that again.
Engage. Warp drive active.
And then that's going to send me into the next local area, and it's going to slingshot me halfway across the system by the time the game even loads. Now typically, you only get that result with things like frigates. Sometimes you get them with destroyers, as long as you have a very low inertial. But normally it only works with frigates in this manner. It does enable you as a larger ship pilot to move faster through systems, but as I said, I'd be careful doing that through nullsec, because you can get caught up, and if you're not careful, you definitely will get caught up. As I said, it's a tactic that I use very, very often. It's very, very effective. It almost never fails. If it does, it's normally because of something like lag or some kind of glitch that just occurred. Either way, you practice it enough and you will get good enough at it to where it just becomes muscle memory, and it'll be very easy to replicate over and over and over. So next segment I want to talk about is capacitor. To understand the foundational differences of rigs such as things like semiconductor memory cells, or SMCs, or capacitor control circuits, or CCCs. You need to know how they blend together with the game mechanics to produce the overall effect that they have on the capacitor. As a base starting point, I will highlight exactly on what your capacitor is and how it plays a part in everything you do. Your capacitor is essentially your ship's energy or battery. It is impacted by almost everything you do in game, whether it be firing your weapons to warping to the next destination. These actions are measured in cost of GJ, or gigajoules, and inherently, as such, play a part in your capacitor recharge rate.
Autopilot engaged.
The capacitor recharge rate is a non-linear function.
Active.
The rate at any given moment depends on how much energy is stored at that moment. Near zero and near full capacity, the recharge rate is very low and it peaks at 25%. As such, one can surmise that at 50% capacitor, you recharge faster than you would at 75%, or 90%, 30%, or 45%. The important thing to remember is that the recharge rate declines dramatically once it falls below 25% capacity. Therefore, if you're engaged in a fight, leave yourself a margin of safety and consider escaping if it appears that you will soon fall below this amount. Your overall capacitor is determined by ship class and correlating ship engineering skills in the class you are piloting. As a rule of thumb, assume the smaller ship means smaller your overall capacitor, and vice versa. Keep in mind that your capacitor is not your power grid. Your power grid, very simply, is the amount of power available on a ship used to activate powered modules. Each ship has a limited amount of power that can be given to any fitted module. If a pilot adds too many powered modules to the ship, some of them won't be able to be activated. I would say that it is very circumstantial what you should fit on a ship. I would generally suggest oversizing, which is equipping a larger sized module to a smaller sized ship. Something like a large mod on a cruiser or a medium mod on a frigate. Things like that are accomplishable. And they can be very effective, provided you do them correctly, and you take patience and time trying to mold that ship into whatever you're trying to accomplish with it. It is important to remember that every ship, although they can be the same exact ship, they're not the same, and every pilot will pilot a ship differently. There are ways to increase your power grid. That's the rig for your navigation and engineering slots, known as the ancillary power grid router. Some of them can be very expensive, like the T3 rigs are very expensive ones, but T2 and T1 are generally very affordable. I would suggest scooping a bunch of them up for your lesser ships, or even big ones that you maybe don't want to invest so much money in. So in conclusion to that, you can pretty much determine that a capacitor control circuit, or CCC, will benefit you better on a smaller ship that is a smaller capacitor, rather than a semiconductor memory cell.
Drive active.
And vice versa. A semiconductor memory cell, or SMC, will work much better on a larger ship that gets a larger base capacitor boost, which inherently also grants a passive capacitor recharge rate bonus as well. Now, I would say cruisers are probably the one exception to this, mostly because some cruisers have exceptionally large capacitors. Sometimes they don't. It all depends on the ship normally. The drawing you're now seeing on screen is just a visual representation of the bluest balls, really. They're from the constant weeks of no content down in South Delta. We've been very lonely. We do miss our old OG friends. So Damon Zell, if you're still out there, or Weird Bob, if you're still out there, come pay us a visit. That would be great. Now I'm going to stop talking for a second and let you enjoy my horrible handwriting the first day I had my new tablet, while we thank Damon Zell and his men for their contributions to our wallet.
Warp drive active.
And now with the fun over, let's get back
Warp
to the
drive
serious
active.
topic, a little bit of fighting frigates 101. Fighting a frigate can be as exhausting as it is frustrating, and often enough, if the pilot is skilled with a well-kitted ship, it may not matter what you do if you're landed on by one. However, here are some tips to help you possibly survive and defeat an unsuspecting frigate pilot with a trigger finger. Triangulation. This is two separate applications when using this in combat. The first is figuring out exactly what this enemy has equipped to his ship. Often enough, if they land on you, they will lock and apply any negative debuffs that they have equipped to their ship
Warp drive
immediately,
active.
giving you a quick opportunity to analyze how to defeat it. Look at your debuffs that become listed above your control panel that displays your capacitor shield, etc. The second point of application is where you are encountered by more than one frigate and are yourself in a squad as well. The best way to defend against and engage these ships is to blob up if you're in similar ship types like frigates or destroyers, or spread out if you're in larger ships such as cruisers, battlecruisers, and battleships. What this does is force them to pick and choose their targets,
Warp
as well as
drive
give
active.
you guys options to fire on them because of your larger gun class. If they get too close to you, they won't be able to make contact. What I mean by that is to form up with a ball in your ships, and form what is known as a death ball, and gradually get into range of your adversaries. Throw painters on them, web them down, just make sure all of you are engaging the same enemy. For most part, that was the most effective way to handle things like that. In the event that you are in a skilled group, I would suggest that each of you target a enemy individually. This would allow for each of you to have the potential to alpha
Warp
an
drive
enemy off grid
active.
at any point in time. There's also the process called force transversal reduction. That sounds complicated, but it's actually very easy. So if anyone who knows anything about a frigate knows that it relies on a few key elements to be efficient and successful in combat. Burst DPS, speed, and even dual webbing are effective, but perhaps the most useful mechanic on the side of the frigate pilot is transversal velocity and inertial control. This is the reason that, while a frigate is actively orbiting you, it becomes increasingly difficult to hit them. So you come to a point of contention that makes you try to
Warp
force the
drive
game
active.
mechanic to play against the frigate instead of working in their benefit. And as such, this action will result in one of three things. Your primary objective, if in a cruiser fit with a micro warp drive for example, is to lead the frigate in a straight line in order to force his auto-orbit mechanic to both orbit and approach you simultaneously, instead of just orbiting you. The process to do this, tap the enemy in overview and hit approach or orbit, preferably, and drag out to 100 kilometers as quickly as possible. This is the most effective way to combat a frigate, as it eliminates their transversal velocity, and if it doesn't outright eliminate it, it certainly reduces its effectiveness. At this point, the only
Warp
primary
drive
thing working
active.
in favor of the frigate is their speed instead of their inertial control consecutively. And now I'm going to include a video from one of our training exercises where my corporation is attempting to tie me down and defeat my Scorpion with a handful of frigates. So we're going to see how they do. I was excited to see how they did, and I was very impressed with how they handled the situation. So I hope you enjoy it. Have fun.
Warp drive active.
And with that, that about wraps the video up. I hope you enjoyed that video of me getting my ass handed to me by my own corporation, but I'm very proud of my guys for having accomplished what they did in this battle. Thank you for coming out and watching my video. If you enjoyed it, or you feel as though some of the information I've offered here has been or will be useful in the future, please do come back for my next one. If you did in fact enjoy the video, I would greatly appreciate you blapping that like button and booping that subscribe one too. It's been great, guys, and always remember, if you're always mediocre, then you're always at your best.